Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Evil Monkey here, back with another build video, and this one's for Glacial Cloud Viessa, which has been just amazing at dealing with onslaught, because not only does it do incredibly high damage, you have low cooldowns, it also offers an incredible amount of crowd control, meaning when you're casting your abilities, not only can the little trash mobs not even move, but you can crowd control the tyrants and bosses. You'll slow them to where they barely move at all, and they just become a non-factor. And this just allows you to better easily deal with the waves, because not only are you just deleting waves, but any that you don't immediately delete, they can't even get to the objective because they can't move. Meaning this is just amazing once again for Onslaught. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what Glacial Cloud does, let me go and throw it on the screen there. This has been so far my favorite build for Onslaught, because once again, not only does it offer the insanely high damage, but just the utility alone is great for when you're tackling level 3 and even level 2. I've been using this to carry public lobbies. It's just been working out fantastic. I've had no issues with anything. Tyrants, bosses, the random minions that show up, all have been just easy peasy. But enough of me yapping, let's go ahead and hop right into that build so you guys can get there with Viessa. And as always, we gotta start off with our mod section, where I'll go ahead and break down each module, why we're using it, and how it kind of fits into the overall build. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. And starting off our mods will be our cooldown section, with our first module being Nimble Fingers. Now why are we running Nimble Fingers? Well, this is just your basic cooldown module, meaning it gives you a decent amount of cooldown with no downside, making it a really good module to run. Then next up is MP Conversion. I'm running this one because it gives you the highest amount of cooldown possible from an A module, with the only downside being minus maximum MP, and we're fine with doing that because we only do it in this one location. We're fine with doing it once, but no more than that. Now, why are we actually running so much cooldown? Well, this is because while Viessa is a very high damage Descendant, who's able to easily deal with things like elites and tanky targets, she has lower AoE than most Descendants. So we're going to compensate that low AoE by instead running a whole bunch of cooldowns so she can spam out her abilities to achieve the same effect. Instead of having to throw out one ability, we'll throw out 5 abilities to be able to wave clear easier. And this is especially good in things like the new mode Onslaught, where you have incredibly tanky targets, as this allows her to very easily just wave clear all the targets since, well, she does high damage, and now she has AoE thanks to this. And this, in fact, isn't the only location we'll actually run cooldown this build. In fact, our next section, the skill power section, we're also going to be running some cooldown on that as well. And in fact, the way we'll actually get both skill power and cooldown in our skill power section will be with our first module here, Focus on Chill, which we're running because Viessa is a chill character, so we want that chill skill power, and once again, this also gives us some cooldown so we can spam our abilities more to achieve that high wave clear that we want. Then next up is Dangerous Ambush. Now we're running this one for skill power because of its unique interaction with Viessa's Frostbite. Since Frostbite immobilizes the target, this allows you to actually activate Dangerous Ambush, which gives you a whole bunch of additive skill power, which is really good and will massively increase your damage, especially since Viessa has such high scalings. We're more interested in skill power here than actual skill power modifier. Now, skill power isn't the only way we're going to increase our damage. In fact, we're going to increase it even more using skill crit rate. And yes, this does mean Viessa's skill crit character, with our first module being here skill concentration. Now, running this one because this just gives you a large increase in skill crit damage, and more damage is always good. Then next up is skill insight, and we're running this because we need the skill critical hit rate, since one of the things in First Descendant is you want to get as close to 100% crit rate as possible if you are a crit Descendant, or if you're running a crit weapon, you want to get that to as close to 100% crit as possible, mainly because of how crit resistance works in this game. So we're running skill insight to get as close as possible to that. And then our next two are going to be front lines and emergency measures, and running these for the same reason. They give a high amount of crit rate and crit damage for us to be able to get as close as possible once again to that skill crit rate being maxed out, and the increased crit damage is just always good to run. Now, why is Viessa actually a crit character? Well, that is mainly because of 2 reasons. Number 1, she actually has a fairly high base critical hit rate at it being 20%, which is actually incredibly large value, and because most values in this game are multiplicative, the base value really does matter a lot. The second reason is because all of her abilities are fusion, meaning she can use Blue Beetle to get even more skill critical hit rate. And between these, you can get up to somewhere around a 97% crit rate, which is incredibly high. Though you can't actually hit 100% skill critical hit rate without assistance from something like an Ancestor module. We'll talk about that later. And next up is going to be our skill range modules. And for this one, we're going to run skill expansion, just because this is your basic one, and it gives a large amount of skill range up. In fact, it gives almost the highest in the game from any module. Now, why are we actually even running skill range here? Because when we talked about cooldown, we were going to compensate our range with just spamming abilities. Well, even though we are going to be spamming abilities to compensate our range, we still do want to increase our base range so that we can hit more with each cast. Since the combination between this range increase and our cooldown, we're going to be able to achieve a large amount of wave clear. This is just something that will also help with that. And as always, our Ancestor module is going to be moved to its own section, where we'll go ahead and take every stat you can roll on your Ancestor module and put it into a tier chart where you guys can use that tier chart to reference if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to go ahead and reroll it. And if you want to jump to that right now, there's a link in the description, and also a timestamp in the timeline of the video itself. And now that we've gone over all of our main modules, let's go ahead and jump into our trigger module. Now for this one, we're going to run Power Beyond. And we're actually going to run this for two reasons. The first reason is, of course, the main reason most builds run Power Beyond. It gives a decent amount of increased skill power, and Viessa has very high scalings, so increased skill power goes a long way. The second reason, and this is something you don't honestly use Power Beyond for very often, is its second passive. And that passive is every time you use either a global dot or a ground dot, and use it 4 times, you create a toe effect on the ground. Meaning you'll clump up all the enemies in one little group, which is really good. And this synergizes really well with Viessa, because it turns out Glacial Cloud gives most of her abilities either global dot or ground dot. In fact, it turns 3 abilities to have that. And one of those is going to be one of the abilities we're going to spam a lot, which is our first ability. Now, there's a really good reason why we actually do want this toe effect, other than just, it's more immobilize / crowd control. It's the fact that this synergizes with a component set that we'll talk about later, called Slayer Set. And Slayer Set has this really nice effect that if you defeat enemies under a toe effect, that you have a set chance to get your MP back. And one of Viessa's bigger weaknesses is that because we're spamming so many abilities to compensate for our lack of range, you tend to have MP issues. And thanks to this combo, it helps fix that. Slayer plus Power Beyond will give you a large amount of your MP back. Since you're often defeating enemies and you're spamming abilities, you're constantly going to be creating this effect, making this a really good combo. And on top of that, both Power Beyond and Slayer Set will give you a massive amount of skill power up, which once again is just really, really good on Viessa because of her insanely high scalings on most of her abilities. Making Power Beyond just a really good choice for Viessa that synergizes really well with Glacial Cloud. And finally, time for our last module section, the Ancestor Module section. Now, as always, we'll go ahead and take every stat you can roll in your Ancestor module, and then put them into a tier chart, which you can use to determine if your Ancestor module is good or if you want to reroll it. Now, one real quick thing about Viessa, she actually has 3 different types of skill power that she can roll, type-wise, which kind of is fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. It's fortunate because since we're only going to be using fusion here, you do have more stats you can use as a negative Ancestor module roll, which is good since those don't affect your build at all and allow you to hit higher rolls on your positives. The downside is because there's more things in your pool to roll, it's going to be harder to hit an Ancestor module that you really want, or a perfect one. So just be okay with rolling a not so optimal one Viessa, since it's going to take a long time to roll a maxed out one that's once again perfect. But actually getting into our tier chart, let's go ahead and start with S tier, which is going to be your best tier. Our first value here is skill crit damage. Now skill crit damage is really good because Viessa is a crit character, and this just raises up your damage by a lot. Then next up is Fusion skill power boost and Chill skill power boost. Now running these for the same reason. They just increase your damage by a lot, and this is because Viessa has really high scalings almost for abilities. And Viessa is a chill Descendant with all of your abilities being fusion in this build. And then our last value in S tier is skill cooldown. Now, the reason we want skill cooldown here is because of two reasons. Number one, we're not able to hit 90% cooldown, which is max cooldown with this build, which is kind of unfortunate because that last 10%, since we're able to hit around 80% cooldown, really does add a lot of cooldown. Some of your abilities will go from being a 6-second cooldown to something like a 10 or 11-second cooldown. So getting that 90% helps a lot with you being able to spam out abilities more, and it's just a really good way to increase your DPS. Now the other reason why cooldown is really good here is because if you roll a high enough cooldown value, you can remove cooldown from other places in the kit, such as the Reactor, which we'll go over later, and you can remove the cooldown from that and replace it with something like Fusion skill power boost or Chill skill power boost, which would also ramp up your damage a lot. So this just makes cooldown a really, really good stat to roll. And then going on to our next tier, A tier, which has really good stats still in it. Our first one is going to be skill critical hit rate. Now this one's kind of similar to our reasoning behind skill cooldown. For skill crit rate, we actually can't hit 100% naturally without the help of the Ancestor module. We're only able to hit 97 out of the 100. So with this, you can actually get 100% skill crit rate. While that 3% isn't that much of a difference, it does help. The other big reason is because if you roll a high enough value, you can actually remove things like skill insight, which we use to get skill critical hit rate from our mod section, and replace it with something like HP or some other value. Now, speaking of max HP, our next value is actually max HP. This is because it's just a really good defensive value on Viessa, making her more tanky. While you are tanky enough to survive all content, it's always good just to have a little bit extra defense stats just to make certain you don't get hit by some big ability and get downed. Then, going on to our middle of the packed values in B tier, we have skill cost. As I mentioned before with our trigger module, Viessa does have some slight skill cost issues, so reducing that is actually pretty good, but this isn't as good as things in A tier or S tier, but it's still a really good thing to get. Then next is skill effect range. This will just allow you to hit max skill range, which once again will help with your wave clear. It's a good thing to roll. Then fusion skill modifier. Now this one is in B tier because once again, as I stated several times, Viessa has incredibly high scalings on almost all of her abilities. So this isn't that great, but still more damage, so it's an okay stat to roll. Then finally, defense. And defense is just always a good solid stat to roll. It's just more survivability, and more survivability is always good. Then next up is C tier. Now C tier, the values in this tier, you really don't want to roll as a positive or negative. They don't really help the build much, but if you roll them as a negative, they hurt the build a lot. So you just kind of want to avoid these values. And we only have one value here, and that's max MP. And once again, this has to relate to Viessa having some MP issues. Now, we don't want to lose any more MP because then you'll just run out of your MP faster. But we also don't really want this as a positive because it doesn't really do too much for the build. All the things in S, A, and B tiers are just significantly better. So just kind of trying to avoid this stat no matter what. And then our final tier is going to be D tier. Now, this is the don't take as positive tier. These are the perfect ones to take as negative values because either don't hurt the build at all or hurt it very little. And pretty much all these don't help the build at all. So perfect to take as your negative values on your Ancestor module rolls. Now our first one here is skill duration up. Now this one actually surprised me as well when I was testing stuff out. It turns out your first and fourth ability are not affected by duration. They just have a set distance that they will travel before they explode, or whenever they collide into something like a wall or inanimate object, or the ground. So it turns out skill duration actually just doesn't affect those two, and has very little effect on the build, only affecting your second ability and a little bit of your passive, but because we spam abilities so much, we don't really have to worry about this duration being lowered at all. So, since it doesn't affect our first or fourth ability, this is a perfect one to take in D tier. Next up, we have Skill Tech Power Boost, Tech Skill Modifier, Singular Skill Power Boost, and Singular Skill Modifier. These are all four for the same reason. We have no scaling that's tech nor singular, so they're perfect values to just throw away, since they have zero effect on the build. And our last one in D tier is Max Shield. Now, what we're ramping up in this build is Max HP, and we don't really care about Max Shield because of that, and you don't really want to invest in both pools. You just want to invest in one or the other. So you can get rid of Max Shield since it'll have almost no effect on your survivability. And that's going to be it for the tier chart. Hopefully this will help you guys decide if you want to reroll that Ancestor module or if you want to keep it. And now that we've wrapped up all of our mod sections, let's go and hop right into our Arche Tree. Now for Arche Tree, the main things we want to focus on is the fact that we're getting skill crit nodes here with the skill crit damage and skill crit rate. We want these to be able to get as high skill crit rate as possible and increase our damage a lot. And we're also going to grab the gold cooldown node here because we want as much cooldown as possible to try and get as close to max skill cooldown as possible. We won't be able to hit max cooldown, but we will be able to get fairly close. And then we also want to grab the MP recovery node here in the middle. This is just to help fix Viessa's MP issue where she does have some MP cost issues. This is just something inherent to her kit, especially since we'll be spamming so many abilities. And a lot of things we're doing in this build is to help mitigate that and fix that issue. And then finally, we're taking 2 HP nodes. Now, this is so that you just have some more survivability, which is always good. And then, moving on to our Mutant Cells, which are also important here, you have 2 options. The first is Chain Chill Catalyst. Now, this one is really good because it lowers enemies' chill resistance, which is fantastic. Really good against high health enemies, and you really like to have that reduced resistance because some of the resistance gets very high, allowing you to do a lot more damage. The next one is Steady Hands. Now, Steady Hands is really good because it gives you increased crit damage against any enemy that has Frostbite and uses slow type skill. And Viessa applies Frostbite really easily, and every single one of her abilities is a slow type. So you can pretty much guarantee get this with almost every cast. Now, both these are really good. I personally prefer Steady Hands because it's just generally good across everything. But whichever one you choose, both work perfectly well with this build. Let's go ahead and go over our components that we're going to run for this build. So I talked a little bit about this back in the trigger module section, but the number one I recommend is Slayer Set. This is because not only does it give you skill power, which will increase your damage, it also helps mitigate the MP issue that Viessa has from spamming so many abilities. And while this is the one I recommend, there is another option if you feel like you're not having any MP issues that you can run, and that's Polar Night Set. Polar Night Set will have a higher damage output, partially because it gives so much skill crit damage, and also its passive will cause enemies to explode, or at least have a chance to explode, and damage other enemies around them, which makes it the higher damage option. But I really do recommend Slayer Set here because there's no point in having more damage if you can't cast your abilities because you're running out of MP. But going on to the substats that we'll run here, you're going to want max HP, max MP, MP recovery modifier, and MP recovery in combat. Basically just run everything MP, and you want the max HP just so you have more defensive stats, or survivability stats. Then going on to the component cores you're going to run for this build, you're going to want to run 4 max HP, because as we said a lot of times here, we're going to use max HP as one of our biggest survivability tools, and Viessa's max HP was just recently buffed, so she actually has a very high base stat now in this. Then for your other 4 component cores you're going to want to run 2 defensive cores, And your other two are going to be free slots that you can just change depending on what you're fighting. If you're fighting fire enemies, fire defense, resistance. If you're fighting toxic resistance. Or if you want the good old general set, just run 4 defensive cores and you'll be solid in pretty much all content. Now it's time for our Inversion Reinforcement. So for this one, you're going to want to run these 3 stats. The first one is Spatial Dominance. This will give you more skill effect range, which will help with our AoE a lot, which will help with our wave clear. Then Deploy Hardened Shell. This one, every time you take an instance of damage, you get damage reduction taken. So that means you'll just take less damage, which is always good, and it's a percentile, which means enemies that hit really hard, it's going to reduce their damage by a significant portion. And then for our third stat, this one you can kind of change its preference. I like Enhanced Regeneration because it means all those HP orbs and MP orbs are going to give me a lot more. But once again, you can change this out depending on how you want to play. And for the reactor we're going to run in this build, it's going to be a Chill Fusion Reactor. And this is because Viessa is a chill character, and all of her abilities scale off fusion. Now, for the substats you're going to want, your first one's going to be skill cooldown. Because as we stated before, you want as much skill cooldown as possible in this build. So it helps with your wave clear, and also you can throw out more abilities against bosses, and more abilities thrown out means more instances damage, which means you're going to eat through that boss even quicker. Now, for your second stat, you're going to have 2 options. A, you can run skill crit damage, which gives you a higher damage potential, or B, you can run skill critical hit rate, which gives you more guaranteed high damage. Now, the only difference between not running skill crit rate here and running it is without it, you'll be at 90%, and with having it, you'll be at 97%. There's only a 7% difference in your skill crit hit rate, which isn't that massive. So this honestly comes down to a preference of whether you want the higher damage potential or the more guaranteed damage. And now let's go ahead and move on to the weapon we're going to use in this build. Now it's going to be Blue Beetle, and we're using Blue Beetle because of Blue Beetle's passive that every time you use a fusion type skill, you get a whole bunch of skill critical hit rate, which is perfect for Viessa because all of her abilities are fusion, and she is a skill crit character. So this is the perfect weapon to run. Now because we're only using this gun for its passive, the build is pretty bare bones. All you need is 2 sprint cores or 2 grappling hook cores, whichever one you prefer. And then for your mods, you can run Quick Freeze, which allows you to spread your frostbite even better. And Defense Master, which is just more survivability, which is always really good. Now a quick note about the weapon of why we're using Blue Beetle over Clairvoyance. Blue Beetle's passive is really good, but Clairvoyance also has a really good passive of reducing enemy chill resistance. But the reason why I prefer personally Blue Beetle over Clairvoyance is because to get Clairvoyance as passive, you have to shoot the enemy for several seconds, which means you're not casting your abilities during that time. And that just feels bad since we're constantly trying to cast our abilities in this build. So Clairvoyance is still quite good. Blue Beetle is just better here. And now on to the tips and tricks section, where I'll show you guys a couple things that can kind of enhance your gameplay with Viessa a little bit. So the first one is something I talked about a little bit earlier in the Ancestor Mods section, that if you throw out an ability, it'll kind of just keep going and keep going and keep going until it hits a certain distance, like that. Well, keeps going. There it goes. So it won't explode even if you hit an enemy, like so. I'll just keep going through it. Even though it does continuous damage during it, there's actually another tick of damage at the end of your first and fourth abilities. It's a huge explosion, as you guys saw there. And that actually does way more damage than it just simply passing through by itself. So if you guys want the maximum damage, one thing you can kind of do is angle it to where it explodes off the ground. Kind of like so. Go through, go through, go through, and then you get the burst. Same thing with your fourth ability. A little bit hard to angle it sometimes. Like, that wasn't quite what I wanted, but there we go. That should do it. You get all the damage ticks, and then you still get the pop at the end. That's one way if you're like fighting a boss, you can kind of maximize your damage a little bit. It's just like a little neat trick. You can just like angle it. It also works with like a wall or pretty much anything else. The ground is just like, you know, always there, so it kind of works the best. The other thing I wanted to show you guys, and this is pretty commonly known about Viessa, if you hop, or well, first if you activate your second ability there, and you hop on your bike, it still activates. So it'll still follow you through. It's just a nice little fun thing. The main thing though was the first one. Anyways, hopefully that'll help you guys a little bit while you play Viessa. And that's gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this build video. Now I've been really enjoying playing Viessa, especially in Onslaught. I think she just works amazingly well with not only the high damage that we've gotten with this build, but also just that amazing utility for being able to crowd control everyone, making her just an amazing control mage that just works perfectly for this new endgame content. Well, let me know what you guys think about the build down in the comments below, or if you have any questions, also go hit me up down below as well. And if you did enjoy the video, or if you plan to use the build, I really would appreciate if you get that like button. It helps out the video a lot, get out to more people. And also, if you want to know when new videos are going to come out, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, I do stream most days on Twitch. I'll go ahead and throw up the information on screen there. We're going to be doing a lot of Onslaught over the next couple weeks. So if you guys want to join in on any Onslaught, you can always hit me up there. And once again, if you did enjoy the video, I really would appreciate you guys hitting that like button. It really does help the video out a lot. It just helps the YouTube algorithm send it out to more people. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all again next time.